Mark Smith from our Office of Research and Standards.
All right, so we're going to switch here and talk a little bit of science, but it's going to be relatively simplified. Folks in the back can hear with this. Okay, excellent. All right, so today I'm not going to be talking so much about the specific toxicology, which I think is what is on the agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the recommendations that we're developing pertaining to what the tests are, and then how to use that data in a meaningful way to evaluate and assess some of the risks for this fairly large group of compounds. All right, so in the draft Pfas sampling guidance, which I think many of you perhaps have provided some input and review, we got some feedback that included a number of comments related to what do we test for, just PFO and Pfas, where we have the most data, or how far do we go beyond that? And the second question is, if we do go beyond that, well then, what do we do with the data that we get, since we don't have an RFD or a health advisory for drinking water, right now for anything beyond PFO and Pfas. So a few of the approaches that have been used by other states, by EPA, other federal agencies right now, have been either just focused sampling and analysis and testing on PFOA and Pfas, and that's it, at least in terms of the reporting of the data. And that's because there's an RFD and an health advisory, so we know what to do with the data. We've got some ways and mechanisms of evaluating. Second approach, actually jump down to the third one here, is just to focus on the UCMR3 analytes. And UCMR, the acronym is the Unregulated Chemical Monitoring Rules, and this is the drinking water program, federal EPA requirement to test for compounds that we don't have standards for, and six of the compounds, we got a pointer. The UCMR 3 protocol included 6 of the perfluorinated compounds, and we'll get to a quick preview of a chart with a bunch of these compounds on it. So in this case, 4 of them do not have RFD or health advisory information. It includes Pfas and PFOA, but I'll note, and we'll talk about this more in a little bit, that 3 of the 4 are very similar in terms of structure, activity, and toxicological information in Pfas and PFOA. Another approach is to look and to analyze for the full suite of compounds under the EPA 537 methodology, and that's 14 compounds. So obviously there's 12 there that lack RFD or health advisory information. That suite of compounds includes all of the 6 that are included in the UCMR3 analysis for drinking water, that national program, and of course it includes Pfas and PFOA. Other states and other agencies have done other things. New Hampshire right now is recommending a total of 9, includes some overlap with the 537 analytes, but a couple of compounds that aren't part of the analytes specified there. And then the military and in some of the preliminary work in New Hampshire, they were testing somewhere between 20 and 24 compounds using labs doing isotopic methods, and you can actually probably now do well over 30 plus compounds. And of course, there are other approaches for totaling all of the compounds, perfluorinated compounds as well. The standard methodologies in terms of those that really have approved methods from EPA is the 537 method and the subsets that are included there. All right, so here's a complicated chart, and we don't need to worry about reading all the details of the name. This is 16 different perfluorinated compounds, and if we come over here, we've got the EPA 537 analytes, so that's 14 of them. UCMR3 analytes indicated with next, 6 of them. The New Hampshire analytes, which has 9, and you can see it includes a couple that are not part of the EPA 537 methodology. The derivation of the 9 from New Hampshire was based on the more extensive initial analysis that they did, and these were the ones that showed up in their broader data set. And then we'll get to the Connecticut policy in a moment. So these are all organized by carbon chain length, and there's some relationships between toxicity information and basically the persistence in the environment and within the body based on chain length. PFO and PFAS are indicated in red. Those are the two that we have the RFD information for from EPA. What Connecticut has done is they've issued the Connecticut Department of Public Health and Policy, basically recommending that 5 of the 6 UCMR3 analytes, all of the longer chain ones, be included in the sum to compare to the health advisory, EPA 70 parts per trillion health advisory for drinking water. So in essence, that means adopting and using the RFD or PFO and PFAS, which is the same, and applying it to the other 3 chemicals as well. They did not include the short chain one, which is included here. That's PFBS. And we'll get on the next chart some discussion of why that wasn't included. I'll note that I think there's only one state that I'm aware of, which is Minnesota, that has the guidance value for shorter chain, more carbon chain compounds, and it's 7,000, so 2 orders of magnitude greater than that would be the drinking water health advisory, 2 orders of magnitude greater than the EPA health advisory for PFAS and PFOA. All right, so a little more detail. We've looked at some of the information that Connecticut provided and some additional information. This summarizes a lot of data on toxicology and persistence. If we look at the UCMR3 compounds, that's 6 of them. Oh, he's keeps me alert. We have one column for in vivo toxicities. That's basically animal test data, mostly rats and mice. In vitro toxicity data. In this case, this is mostly cell cytotoxicity data from cell culture systems. You'll see on half-life information, and this is from people, so the rest estimates that in a pretty broad range, these are sort of the values what's available. If we look at PFOA, well, first of all, if you look at the structures, which may be a little hard to see here, but we have 2 different functional groups at the end, carboxylic acid groups. We can't see the yellow is the sulfur. That's a gas and functional group. It doesn't, take a sophisticated toxicologist or rocket scientist to see that they think these are pretty similar compounds, both in terms of chain length, functional group, and charge distribution. Fairly close. When we get down to the shorter ones, you can see, they're a lot shorter. There's some differences with the shorter carbon chain. So just looking at these things at first glance, you can see that there are a lot of similarities in the structures. And that actually is reflected in the available toxicity information. So if you look at PFAS and PFOA and ranking of everything here compared to PFOA, what we see is the in vivo and in vitro toxicity for all of the long chain compounds are all close. And if you look at the persistence data where we have it, 3 of the compounds, they're relatively close as well, and actually the shorter chain compound, PFHXS, has actually got a longer. This is probably a significant difference, although again, there's quite a bit of variability in half-life measurements. When we get down to the short chain, carbon length 4 here, which was included in UCMR3, the toxicity is quite a bit different, and the half-life, short half-life, is dramatically shorter. And this explains why the movement right now in terms of production and use of these types of fluorinated chemicals is towards the shorter chain derivatives. There's a lot of emerging toxicity information on the shorter chain derivatives with different toxicity endpoints, not to say that they're safe, but I think there's quite a bit of evidence that they are less persistent. All right, so that basically leads us to what we're currently recommending. So back to this list here. We're recommending for DEP, or for the drinking water program, that we really encourage folks to test for all 14 of the EPA 537 analytes. We'd like to get some occurrence data in Massachusetts to see which ones are showing up here. So as a start, we'd certainly like to see data and testing for all of them. If you have a site with a compound that you suspect may have been used or may have been involved in a release that's not on the list, that should be pursued as well. And for many of these compounds, labs can develop or have developed techniques using isotopic dilution methods to test for things beyond this list. This is a good starting point. In terms of handling the data, again, we're quite comfortable with the Connecticut policy recommendation. We've done some additional work that I think supports that. And we would recommend summing all 5 of those compounds, comparing to the health advisory, basically using and applying the RFD for PFAS and PFOA to this as well. So that's basically what we're recommending, and we're sort of looking for feedback and comments from folks to see what you all think. Questions?
So I think I just heard you say the recommendation is similar to Connecticut in terms of summing the 5.
Yep.
And as far as analyses to do on PFAS sites, do the 14 compounds in the 537 method?
That's correct. With the addition, if you think you have, or you know you have some other compound that goes beyond that list, you're not just ignore it, so really look for that as well.
Okay. I guess my question is we know these compounds are in a lot of consumer products and AFFF and so forth, but not all 14 are necessarily associated with. There's some specificity in how they were used. Mm-hmm. So if you define a site as a PFAS site, it may be really a couple of those compounds that are really significant to AFFF and the others aren't.
Yeah.
I mean, occurrence in getting that data is useful from a sort of public policy perspective, but is that too wide a net for certain issues, certain releases?
And the answer is yes, it probably is too wide a net for some releases, although the firefighting foams often have a mixture of compounds, certainly will not be fossil control. And I think if you're dealing with a specific site, then you know that there's only 1 or 2 of the compounds that are used. The case could be made that it's focused on the labs. However, when the labs do the analysis, even some of the ECMR3 analyses that were done include more some of the compounds, because that's just the methods that the labs have developed to use. So it's an important issue, yes.
So I guess the correlate questions are, so if you're analyzing for much wider array of constituents than potentially maybe are even associated with release and for which there's no toxicity information available, what are we supposed to do with that information?
All right, so let me jump in on that. It's not that there's no toxicity information available. There's no RFD that it could.
There's no peer-reviewed consensus documented toxicity.
Yes, but there is toxicity information that's available in the literature. And if you do find some of these longer chain ones, rather than ignore them and assume that there's no toxicity, we really recommend taking a deeper dive that we've done today to look at the information that is out there, in particular on the in vitro toxicology literature, to see if we can come up with a meaningful 2-type standard to evaluate the toxicity.
So go to various literature sources, not necessarily described in the hierarchy of toxicity sources and the regulations. And,
right.
I mean, so going way perhaps beyond. So I guess I just, that sounds very problematic to me, and that it's going to, you could have different people coming up with different toxicity values and reaching different conclusions, and how would you even necessarily be able to know if that's appropriate and if it's not, regulated? I guess I think the level of uncertainty that we're getting into by going down that path is problematic. And so if you take what BP decided with homegrown produce, for example, using BMPs instead of requiring quantitative evaluation because the level of uncertainty and the fact that it ended up driving risk, but with so many layers of uncertainty and conservatism built in at sites and preventing closure, I'm worried that this is going to turn into the same snowball, and I'm not sure what the value added necessarily is.
All right, so let me just say the value added is that the in vitro toxicity data, which have the longer chain compounds, and the persistence in the environment, and persistence in the human body are all considerably worse than PFAS and PFOA, factors of 4 to 6. The data is much more limited. It's clearly just in vitro data. which you have to extrapolate from, but basically to ignore them at this point, to me, makes absolutely no sense at all. So we're certainly interested in other approaches that would get us to a point where we would actually be addressing those compounds, rather than just kind of pretending that they don't have any toxicity. I'm certainly open to suggestions. I do understand your concern, but the reality is there's like 3,000 of these 3,000 plus fluorinated compounds that are out there, and we're still only looking at a pretty limited suite. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I do. So a couple of things, I think, in addressing your comment is that we are looking at chemicals that are unregulated, right? And so we're looking at thousands of these things. National Toxicology Program, in conjunction with National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, is releasing, can't hear, on screen? So the National Toxicology Program, in conjunction with the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, is releasing a large study intended to be released, I think, at the end of the summer, probably a little bit later than that, that does take a look at some of the non-PFOA, non-PFOS PFASs. I think the data that are accumulating, both from the in vitro studies, which are available, and some of the in vivo studies do point to the effects of these chemicals as being significant in terms of developmental toxicity, not something to be walked away from. The fact that we don't have good in vivo 2-year animal bioassay studies speaks to the fact that we can't get funding to do the studies unless we demonstrate the presence of these things in the environment and the importance of studying these things. So it's sort of a circular argument. And I think in this case, because we do have good now epidemiological data pointing to the group of PFASs beyond PFOA and PFOS as having effects that are significant on thyroid, on brain development, on behavior, warrant a closer look so that the scientists can actually get at the question you're really targeting, which is what are the numbers we use, right? And so I do think that we've done this before with other groups of chemicals, where we've said adopt a value and extrapolate, right? I mean, we're still looking at PAHs, right? It's a long time. But I think that these are chemicals, because they lack regulation, we're at the tip of the iceberg, right? And we need those data, and I think a combination of in vitro and in vivo and epidemiological data point to the problematic nature of these chemicals.
All right, thank you.
Mark, given all the toxicology,
Yes.
one of the problems, I think the number one problem we face is collecting representative environmental samples. Beyond that, I think our clients reasonably ask the question of, is this really a problem from the environmental source? I mean, if we think about, my small grandchild, hypothetically, who is crawling on the PFAS-coated carpet and PFAS-coated furniture, lives in a house that is filled with this, rides in a car filled with this, but may come into contact with part per trillion concentrations in soil, possibly compared to maybe part per million concentrations constantly in their living environment. There's a lot of question about the utility of what we're doing.
Yeah, it's a good question, and the answer to that really is probably the soil exposure pathways in and of themselves are likely to not be significant, but the drinking water pathways certainly can be. And if you look at the pharmacokinetic extrapolations from exposures at and around the EPA health advisory, then that drinking water pathway becomes a predominant and significant source of overall exposure to individuals who are drinking that water. So it is significant from that
So
standpoint.
again, so it's, so
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to, so
my answer.
in the environmental samples, we have air, water, and soil, just sort of broadly. Our focus is primarily on drinking water.
It's primarily drinking water from the standpoint of significant exposures. You know, air, again, indoor air, because of particulates coming off all the stuff you just listed, is a significant source of exposure. It's not something that we're addressing, so it's
But
beyond our
it's not released.
regulatory, right, it's
Right,
beyond
it's
our
not under our
regulatory reach. It's not a release, and we're not dealing with that. But the drinking water elements, you know, absolutely, and there are some limited areas where there have been significant air releases that have resulted in deposition. This is up in New Hampshire, contamination of soil and drinking water. So the air exposure pathway historically, yeah, maybe there was some significance there, but to parse that out from all of those other exposures is probably not possible.
So I guess in light of that, is DP going to be telling the regulated community to focus on GW1 areas, which is something I think a lot of us commented upon that, you know, and I think Wendy talked about last time that in terms of relative contribution to exposure and risk, drinking water is really the number one focus. So are we going to be able to just limit our risk evaluation on the exposure of concern for release-related impacts? And as a corollary, I would still just remind people, risk assessment is a hypothetical construct. It is not a substitute for epidemiological study or a health study. We're making a number of very upper bound, sometimes exceedingly unrealistic, conservative assumptions to be protected. So I just don't want to get to a point where we're coming up with a risk that's way beyond even a reasonable maximum exposure scenario. So that's another thing that sort of concerns me with, you know, us doing our own research projects and coming up with toxicity values and then plugging those into a very conservative construct that wasn't really meant to study health effects per se.
So we could probably discuss for hours the relative
Yeah,
conservativeness of the risk assessment and toxicology process. I would disagree with significant amounts of what you just said. It's not right. But yes, I think in terms of focusing attention on GW1 areas where there could be a drinking water pathway related exposure, yeah, I think that makes sense in terms of how we're integrating that into the provisions. I don't comment on that.
As we had heard, and we think that it's a good idea that for the fact sheet focuses on kind of the level of effort and where we expect or where we hope that people will look for PFAS because it is an additional analysis. It's, you know, the lab capacity is getting better. So it's, you know, where we want people to focus, where we want people to look, and that's I think the fact sheet will reflect that our greatest concern are for exposures in GW1 areas. So you know, there are a variety of things that would lead an LSP to conclude that, you know, I should be looking for PFAS in this context, and one of them where we would have put additional weight would be in GW1 areas. And if it's not in a GW1 area, then we will not say never look for it, because there are going to be situations where, say, you're dewatering soil and you're creating exposure and you're going into a stream or something where, you know, we don't want, if it's PFAS, we don't want to create different exposures, but those are more unique situations. So I think the fact sheet will reflect that GW1 focus.
Oh, Nancy wants to just a couple.
Oh, wait.
Okay, just a couple of points. First, on soil, preliminary looks at soil exposures does make it look like that's much lower risk than groundwater, but remember, we haven't done the analysis to see what levels would be of concern for leaching into groundwater yet, and that's probably going to be a driving factor for soil PFAS analyses at sites. The other thing that I wanted to mention, just to put sort of the risks into perspective, we're all carrying around a fairly high body burden of PFAS compounds, levels that actually probably are causing harm to some people. So when we talk about, really tiny exposures and uncertainty, really there's no uncertainty about the fact that we're already at risk levels, and any small exposure just adds into that. So I wouldn't minimize the problem of small exposures and the uncertainties about the risk assessment for that reason. Mark, you might disagree with that, I don't know. But
No, I would agree with that.
All right, and I just note here on conservativeness, in the EPA Health Advisory in 70, other states that have looked at this more closely using recent data are coming up with considerably lower values. We are sticking with the 70 for right now. We think it's within the range of it's certainly not.
I have a question. I don't know if I need a microphone, but I have a question about the. I have a question, a few comments about the analytical methods. EPA is definitely frowns upon modifying their drinking water methods at all. From many environmental chemists' point of view, mine included, the method that EPA puts forth is not the most accurate, precise, best method for this analysis. Isotope dilution is a better method. Would DEP accept isotope dilution method changes to the EPA method to look at drinking water on the sites that we're evaluating?
The complexity is for the drinking water program, they do really sort of require the methodologies to be used. So if we're linking back to the drinking water issue, then we would prefer the EPA 537 method. Having said that, for a site assessment process, those other methods provided the appropriate QA/QC information is provided and made available. I think would be appropriate and would be acceptable.
Yeah, I think when Mark said it links back to drinking water issues, to be very specific, the DEP drinking water program, which regulates public water supplies. So it's more part of the divide is public water supplies where there are very clear and inflexible, mandated. I mean, they do what they do, and that is their program, and they have it's very complicated. They have requirements for what methods that they use. So if you are dealing with a public water supply that may be related to 21D site, but is also a public water supply regulated by 310 CMR 22, then there are requirements for the use of specific analytical methods. That said, if you are dealing with drinking water that is a private well, which is not regulated by that program, and is only a 21D site, then the performance standards that are generally applicable under the MCP would apply. The data has to be of known and usable quality, et cetera, et cetera. So that, I think in our, maybe by kind of site assessment versus drinking water, it may become complex, and since a lot of our sites are related to public water supplies, it may default to that method.
But there is a question.
And the methodology, development, and toxicity information, it is all rapidly developing. It's a process. EPA is working on developing methods that would be applicable for soils. We've been working with FDA on methods applicable for food items. It's just a lot of stuff happening. Ops data, it's indicated there's all these EHS studies. EPA's move towards trying to use structure-activity relationships and in vitro toxicity information in place of to supplement the animal studies. And when you've got 3,000 chemicals with new ones being generated, created, basically on a weekly basis, there's no hope of doing 2-year animal studies on all of those. And will ever happen. We really have to be able to extrapolate information in order to deal with those. Yes?
One last thing. One thing that we're always struggling with in this type of work, in this case example, we have many indoor airs, another is occurrence. You know, what is a release and what is occurrence from use of these products? What I really use help with now is what are the studies that are being done related to excretion and wastewater impacts. Cape Cod is a prime example of wastewater is discharged to a GW1 water supply. To what extent is that a contributing factor to any data we might collect from a water supply well at a homeowner's location or a community supply on Cape Cod or anywhere else in the state? Septic systems are a reality, wastewater discharges to groundwater are a reality. What do we know about that source?
There's a lot of information about those sources. We've not dived in to look at those, but I think those are one really good questions.
Because those are the kinds of things we'll need to bring to bear when we go about assessing groundwater, whether it be a homeowner's well next to a AFFF release at a firehouse. Is there a septic system a contributing factor, and to what extent can we ferret that out and tease it out and put it aside?
In some ways, it's very, like with that, it's very similar to 1,4-dioxane. And, we've seen things like sampling, the effluent from wastewater treatment plants or from septic systems in order to do that on a case-by-case basis. And also, I think we'll eventually see broader studies like we have seen for 1,4-dioxane, PFAS in, ambient groundwater in locations like that.
But I'm thinking about this sort of UCMR type study that is based on sources as opposed to exposure points.
All right, thank you, everyone. And any other feedback or